All right, it's time to check out the secret sauce of Pokerface. Now, if you haven't seen the video on how to use the draft lobby, go check that out. Otherwise, let's jump right in to the powerhouse of Pokerface. That's the manager box. As we open this up, it's going to take a minute. There's a lot of data going on inside this, but it is well worth your system resources, let me tell you. Now, these manager boxes, you've got 3 at a time. The manager boxes up here, we can select managers that we want to watch. What I'll typically do is keep an eye on maybe the most feisty of opponents that we're going up against, or those who are bidding on tilt, meaning that they are really pushing their bidding or price enforcing or just buying a lot of players. It doesn't matter. It's up to you who it is you're going to keep a closest eye on, and you can hop around as you need to. The way this works is it will refresh as you are drafting. Let's say we got Michael Thomas on the block. He's pretty valuable as a wide receiver. He's pretty good at football, and so we get into a bidding war over him, and it looks like Jared is going to take him home. You can type in the name really quickly. He grabs him for, let's say, $50. Sold. Is it going to Jared for $50? Yep. And what it's going to do, it's going to refresh both tables and reset your draft lobby. Now we look over here. We see that Michael Thomas was Jared's third buy over here inside this manager box. Now, let's take a detailed look at what it is we're looking at. Obviously, these are nothing special. The balances versus max bids. This is how much money they have versus how much they can spend on a given player at a given point. Every draft lobby does this, but our secret sauce is down here in these stats and gradients. So we're going to unpack what they mean. Tilt is really simple. Tilt is just the number of transactions out of the past 12 that this manager has purchased. Tilt is helpful because it helps me know to what degree somebody's on a streak, how bullish they are in their drafting overall, and it gives them a rank compared to the other managers in your league. So these guys right now are tied for 5th place in terms of the amount of purchases that they are making. I don't have a lot of data in here just yet, so that's not anything to write home about. However, it is helpful when you're getting into it. This bar right here demonstrates how far along they are in their draft, meaning of all the transactions that have happened inside the draft, how many of them has this manager owned, and that percentage is going to just tick away through the draft. This is a really easy way at a glance to know how far along they are in their draft. Now, these values, this is when we're really getting into the meat here. Fantasy Pros gives us a comparison of values right here, and this is the average difference, whether positive or negative, the average difference that this manager is paying for their players versus their actual value. So in this case, Pete has purchased 3 different players here. We can see he's probably overpaid for each of them right here, maybe not Le'Veon Bell, but your value comparison for this tells us that on average, compared to what Fantasy Pros says, Peter is paying on average $4.67 over what they are worth. Why is that helpful? Well, because 1, it puts us in Pete's head, and that's a scary place to be, I realize, but on a draft day, it is the place you want to be at, because we know if this is true, and this is his average overage or underage for a given player, that, you named it, while we are in a bidding war, we can look at this value right here and assess that, man, we really think that Peter's average is going to be right here, $4 above this number. So we can price enforce Rob Gronkowski up to about $40 or $41 because we know that Peter won't pay less than that based on his Fantasy Pros comparison. This is just a statistic to give us an edge. There's also a rank right here, and that's what this bar graph shows at a glance compared to the other 11 members of our league. Basically, who's closest to 0, who's nailing it the most, or who's doing very well on value, who's below value. My value comparison is the exact same stat, and in this case it's the exact same numbers because you remember back when we set it up in our league settings, I set up the default values, my values, to match Fantasy Pros. If I had gone in and changed my values, they would probably look a little bit different, and yours should, because your values are definitely not going to look like Fantasy Pros values across the board. So that's how you use these stats, is to get kind of a statistical hunch as to what managers are going to pay for players. I cannot stress enough how helpful it is. Managers guard their values with their life. Like, you cannot find how managers value players because that is a closely guarded secret going into the draft. And this is just one way, one stat to help me try to crack that code and get the edge on my opponents. I'm going to use this in combination with the tilt rank, But the power comes from the degree of desperation. This is my very, very favorite stat. The degree of desperation is basically a percentile of how desperate a person is by position. And it's calculated with an algorithm that is based on the number of available top players in a given position. And the number is different, it's proprietary, and it is different for every single position. And so with the degree of desperation numbers, we can really get a measure of intent based on the opponents that we're going up against. I'm going to use quarterbacks as an example to show you what I mean. Let's say that the draft has been progressing pretty well and all of the top QBs are just getting snapped up pretty quickly now that we're about 3/4 of the way through the draft. In fact, if we look over here, we can see that there's only a couple of more top quarterbacks remaining, the best option of which by Fantasy Pro value is Kirk Cousins, Ben Roethlisberger, and Alex Smith. Now, Peter does not have a quarterback yet, and so we look at this and we see that he's actually 50% desperate for a quarterback, which means that we're starting to get slim on our quarterback options. Brock is in the same boat, and so let's say that Kirk Cousins comes up to the plate and both of these guys start bidding for him. Well, we know that they're not price enforcing. They're actually trying to get this player. How does that help us? Well, we remember what they're willing to pay. And so we can use their value comparison, knowing their intent to bid enforce. And we're going to take Kirk Cousins up maybe $9 or $10 because they need him that badly. And we know how badly they need him. Let's say that Brock picked him up after we price enforced up to $8. Boom. That guy's going to go to Brock. There he goes. He joins the bench. And now Peter is 100% desperate for a quarterback because there are hardly any top quarterbacks remaining. Brock got his, and so his desperation just dropped to 0%. But now when we come back to the draft lobby and Ben Roethlisberger comes up, and I give Pete a hard time every year for liking Big Ben, but he comes back up. I mean, what's not to like? He's got two of the best weapons in the game. So Pete is going to push extra hard to get this guy based on his degree of desperation, and we know based on his value comparison numbers what is likely he will pay. So you can see how these degree of desperation numbers combine with our tilt rank, which gives us the pressure, and the value comparison, which gives us an estimation of what we think they're going to bid. If you look at my negative valuations right here right now, this says that I'm $11 and $12 under what Fantasy Pros said I should be, which means I'm in first place getting a lot of deals, and that's because I got that stellar keeper right there that's measuring it for now. And I also made up some fake numbers here in the stats while I was getting set up for this video. So if you have any questions about how to use this tool to your advantage, I encourage you, one, just click around, hop into a mock draft, try it out, see if these things don't help you gauge your opponents better while you are doing an auction draft. And don't forget to use the tools because the auction draft is a mix of offensive and defensive. You still need to stock your own team and make sure that it's strong too, but the best auction drafters are ones that can use all their tools available to try to have an offensive and defensive strategy going into the draft. I sincerely want to thank you for taking a look at this. If you find this at all valuable, I'm very, very humbled by that. I sincerely hope that this enables you to dominate your draft. If it does, I'm going to do my little shameless. If it does, allow me to do my little shameless plug again. Please consider buying me a meal. Sorry for the plug. Thanks so much.